Welcome to Under the Covers. I am your host, Siren, and tonight I am your guide through the depths of the darkness. Pour yourself a drink, do some gardening, and curl up under the covers as we surrender into the abyss. The Patron Saint of Murder. I received a friend request from an old lady who called herself the Patron Saint of Murder. A cute, petite brunette with shadowy green eyes and pearl white skin. Her profile stood outside the bounds of my carefully constructed lists of acceptable attributes. I'm usually very careful about who I accept as an online friend, discerning what I can from available photos. My friend list numbers no more than 300, a ceiling I strictly adhere to. 300 is a good round number, a reasonable circle of influence, an audience easy to follow and respond to. I have made mistakes accepting those obsessed with politics or religion, or recording every single monotonous, dull moment of their lives, from what they eat to when they shit. Those are grounds for a quick and decisive unfriending. Her real name was Cassidy. Well, at least that's how she finally introduced herself. Who knows? Maybe her name was Karen or Dawn. I was just relieved when she finally stopped insisting on me referring to her by that ridiculous epithet. Her posts were disgusting and off-putting. It was a constant recital of murderous statistics and tidbits of information regarding some of the worst serial killers in history. More than once had I pondered pushing the delete button, but I admit I was attracted to her. In private, she was more subdued, actually a bit charming. She messaged me at first, and in time we were talking regularly on the phone. Unlike her public posts, we never talked of murderers, killers, or historically insane dictators. We talked mostly about me. She was intensely interested in everything I had to say, delving deeper into each sentence I professed about my life or my desires. She never seemed bored, always expressed a desire to talk about nothing but me. Often, I would try to turn the discussion to her and inquire about who she was and where she came from, but she did what she did like and what she did not like to do for fun. She never acquiesced and always turned the conversation back to me. We had sufficiently buttered me up, and then, one day, she made a proposal. "Why don't you come out to Texas? I'd love to hang out with you." My stomach churned. I didn't have the courage to meet her in person, to walk up to her, strutting my massive stature of 5'4" of pitiful disappointment. An online relationship is all I desired, where I could feign a more than average height, and yet I found myself agreeing to fly out to Austin, Texas to hang out with her. Flight M134 to Austin was boarding, one last chance to back out. Quit being a coward, I told myself. If she doesn't like you, then c'est la vie. Isn't that the saying? It's a fucking life. Just live it. Determined, I boarded the plane and took my seat, convinced that I would enjoy myself, if only to travel and see a state I had never seen. My diminutive size can sometimes be a blessing, especially when forced to sit in the middle of the seat, in the only seat available when buying a ticket at the last minute. The expense, unreasonably beyond what it's worth, crammed between my two filthy strangers. I could sit comfortably enough, but I hate when their arms touched me. I squeezed past the bodybuilder sitting in the aisle seat and plopped down next to the obnoxious lady sitting in the window seat. I swear, Julie, if Bob doesn't change that presentation, I'm going to lose it. He is going to get a mouthful from me. Unfortunately, I had to hear her mouthful all throughout boarding. I prayed that the remainder of the passengers would hustle up, toss their bags in the overhead bin, and sit the hell down so we could get through the safety spiel and get back in the air. Once all phone calls would have to cease, and I would do no longer and have to listen to this lady yap and yammer about Bob, who I was beginning to sympathize with. Poor fucking Bob. But of course, boarding is long and tedious. The final passenger made a stink about not getting the seat she wanted. She was a robust woman in her 50s, with long blonde hair streaming down to the small of her back. She wore skin-tight black spandex and a concert t-shirt with long, dangly earrings. "I was supposed to be in D15, she shouted. The number shocked me. I had dodged a bullet, or I had hoped so, for if she were to convince the flight attendant otherwise, the middle-aged teenage wannabe would be sitting right next to me. "Ma'am, you're going to have to take your seat or exit the plane," explained the flight attendant. The blonde pushed aside this flight attendant and bent her head down close to the bodybuilder's face. "You're in my seat," she said with a scowl. Then she turned and looked at me with a big, wide smile and waved, "Hi, babe." Then she walked away and peacefully took her assigned seat. The voice sounded familiar. No, it couldn't be. But then again, it sounded just like her. It sounded like Cassidy. I reasoned otherwise. She wouldn't be on the plane. She's in Texas waiting at the airport. Why would she drive or fly to Nashville only to take a flight right back to Texas? I pushed the thought out of my head. It was simply a coincidence. There were billions of people, and there's bound to be several that sound alike. The plane accelerated and lifted off the ground, pushing my nervous stomach against the back of my seat. The Bob-hating businesswoman next to me immediately fell asleep, like a baby in the car, her head smashed against the window, mouth wide open. She snored, grunted, and grumbled. Lord knows she was dreaming about giving Bob all the hell he deserved. The pilot announced that we were cruising at 34,000 feet and that he was turning off the seatbelt sign. We were free to roam about the cabin. "I gotta piss," the bodybuilder mumbled to himself. He got up out of his seat like an overturned turtle, swinging his bulky biceps, twisting and turning to free his large body. He elbowed me twice, once in the shoulder and another in the temple. "Sorry, man. Damn plane ain't made for people like me." Finally free, the bodybuilder dashed up the aisle, unintentionally hitting everyone he passed, trying his best not to piss his pants. The blonde poked her head up and looked back. A smile flashed across her face. She looked with delight at the empty seat next to me. She sashayed down the aisle, singing loud a song only she could hear. She squeezed into the empty seat next to me. "I love this song." She pulled out her earbud and clumsily shoved it in my ear. Thrashing metal rang through my head. Chaotic distortion pounded through my ear canal. She yanked the earbud out of my ear. "That's the shit right there. I'm psyched, Dave. Oh man, we're gonna have fun." I turned and looked at her in shock. "It's me, Cassidy." She leaned over and whispered, "The Patron Saint of Murder." She bellowed out a soreness laugh, more like a lumberjack than a dainty little woman. "But," I tried to interject. "I thought you were going to catfish me, but you look exactly like your profile. A little shorter than I imagined, but cute. You're a cutie, Dave. I'm so glad you didn't fucking lie." I looked at her in disbelief. The hypocrisy of her statement astounded me. "Ah, I see, but did I catfish you?" "Well, Dave, yes and no. You see, I can't take a picture of myself, a condition I have. No matter how hard I try, there's not a camera in the world that can capture my image, so I just grab a picture of someone I would like to be. It's not falsehood, but more of a handicap." "Ma'am, you're in my seat," interrupted the bodybuilder. "You can have my seat. I'm talking to my man. We couldn't get seats together. You understand." She turned, ignoring the bodybuilder as he put his hands in the air in disbelief. "Well, ma'am, I would have gladly switched seats if you would have asked, but now I'm not feeling so nice. Get out of my seat or I'll pull you out." He grabbed her by the arm and pulled her up out of the seat. Cassidy grabbed his lower jaw and the back of his head and violently twisted. There was a loud, sharp crack. The bodybuilder's head went limp, his chin flying flat against his back and the back of his head, situated above his chest. The body slumped and fell on top of Cassidy. She slung it off and on top of the passenger sitting in the adjacent row. Screeching, hollering, and screaming ensued. A domino of fear fell across the interior of the plane. "Terrorists!" a man yelled. "Get her! She killed a man! Who? Who killed who?" There was confusion and pandemonium, a pointing of fingers, and an unsuccessful attempt to identify the assailant. Cassidy happily revealed herself. The flight attendant approached the melee, trying to calm the situation, and I figured out what was happening. She had no idea that there was a dead bodybuilder laying heavily across 3 poor, weak passengers. "What's happening? Please remain calm and get back to your seats." Cassidy seized her by the hair and pulled her head down, and then she bit into her neck, shaking her head from side to side. She ripped out a chunk of meat and flesh, spit it out, and went in for another bite. Bite after bite, she tore into the flight attendant's neck, nearly severing her head from her shoulders. The nearby seats were awash with blood. All the while, the nearest passengers were pleading for someone to do something. But fear had paralyzed us all, for Cassidy's appearance had changed. Her eyes were a sickly yellow, and her blonde hair had fallen off, revealing a bald, pale, blue skull and pointed ears. Her teeth were sharp and her fingernails long and jagged. Cassidy looked up and felt the top of her head. Her chin and chest were covered in blood, meat, and flesh, like a lion deep in the antelope's belly. There was also embarrassment on her face as she searched for her wig. It was obvious that her true hue of skin was blue, the painted face and false color betrayed by the top of her head. "Dang, this thing never stays put." She picked up the wig and tossed it aside in disgust. Seeing that I was terrified, she tried her best to assuage my fear. "Aw, honey, don't worry. I'm not going to hurt you." She stepped over the flight attendant and grabbed me by the arm. She led me to the bathroom and shoved me inside. "Now you can just stay in here. Mama's going to have a little more fun, and then you and me can have some quality time together." She slammed the door shut and made one last request. "Don't come out. I'll come and get you." When I get going, I can't control myself. "I love you. Do you love me?" I didn't answer, my throat dry and constricted, my mind muddled with fear and exasperation. "Don't worry. In time, you will love me." "Bitch, get on the ground," a man commanded. I heard shuffling of feet and a band of men barking out various demands. A posse had been assembled. The good guys had finally recognized the evil to be confronted and defeated. There was more movement as the men came in closer. Cassidy shrieked and growled. Hell was unleashed. For the next hour, I heard suffering and dying, interrupted periodically by gleeful laughter. There was screaming, crying, pleading, scuffling, but never from Cassidy. Cassidy's strength never waned. I hoped and prayed to hear someone announce that the monster was dead. All was safe. Buckle up and get ready to land. It grew quieter as more and more souls were obliterated and dispatched into darkness. Finally, total and complete silence. The door slammed open. Cassidy's face, glowing yellow, fiercely contrasted against the dark blood caked all over her face. In fact, her whole body was covered in blood. There was a wide, wicked smile across her face, a mouthful of sharp, uniform teeth. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving in and out. She looked as if she wanted to eat me alive. "We're calling the police. They'll be waiting for you. Hope they shoot the shit out of you." The lone survivors, the pilot, were locked safe and sound in the cockpit, or so they thought. "That's not nice," Cassidy responded. She pulled me out of the bathroom, dragged me to first class, and shoved me into a seat. She walked up to the cockpit door and kicked it in with ease. The pilots tried to fight, but to no avail. The plane tilted. The pilots fell to the floor. She dragged them out of the cockpit. Her throats were slashed, their eyes gouged, their wounds gushing and widening, their lives quickly fading away. Without thinking, I turned and ran away from Cassidy, fear overriding my reason, as if I had a way to escape. The sight of the interior of the plane and the aftermath of Cassidy's massacre was dreadful. There were bodies torn in half, heads severed and tossed about, entrails scattered throughout. There was not one body intact, not even the first kill, the bodybuilder. Cassidy had ripped both of his arms off. The Bob-hating woman torn to pieces. I vomited and broke down into tears. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Cassidy walked around, her face no longer covered in blood, but her complexion reflecting her true nature. She wiped away the blood from her face, but also the makeup. Her pale blue face displayed consternation. Don't worry, this will all burn up in the crash. And besides, a crash from this height tears a body apart. It will look natural. Everybody think you're dead as well. This ain't my first rodeo. You've done this before? I managed to stammer out. Lord have mercy, he does talk. Yes, Dave, I've done this before. It's the perfect undetectable crime, and it's fun. But we're going to die as well. We're going to crash. We're going to be in this plane. How in the hell do you expect us to survive? I started breathing heavy, panicking, my legs weakening. I felt as if I was about to pass out. Well, that's up to you. You can be with me or die. You can become one of us. A vampire? She smiled, her teeth dull and normal now. Yes, a vampire. But not like in the movies. You'll still be able to walk about in the daylight. You'll be beholden to me, but that's not bad. I'm the head bitch, Dave. You stick with me and you'll have it made. I told you I loved you, and I meant it. I don't care if the feeling isn't reciprocated, as long as I get what I want. She turned and walked towards the cockpit. It's decision time, Dave. Let me push this bird to 13,000 feet. The plane suddenly fell forward and descended quickly. Cassidy made her way to the exterior door and kicked it out. The air exploded in, a roaring sound bellowed through the interior. I was unbalanced and I fell to the floor. Cassidy hauled me up by the shirt and pulled me to the door. Give me a thumbs up if you want to live. I immediately shot my thumb up. Not now, silly, when we're outside. She shoved me out into the sky. I tumbled head over feet several times until finally I leveled out, remembering my training in the army. Make an even surface so you don't tumble through the air. Arms out wide, legs closed tightly together. Cassidy was falling parallel to me about 20 feet away, calm and collected, as if she had done this 100 times before. She turned her head and looked to me. She was waiting on an answer, her eyes wide with anticipation. The ground was approaching fast. My heart, uncontrolled and beating sporadically. A sharp pain in my chest, the onset of a heart attack, provoked by the fear of impending death. I gave her a thumbs up. Cassidy turned, put her arms down by her side, and shot out towards me. She collided into me and wrapped her arms and legs around my body. I felt her sharp teeth sink into my neck. There was a cold, sickening sensation throughout my body. I heard the flap of exploding fabric. Expecting to see a parachute, I was surprised when instead I saw a leathery pair of pale blue wings extending from Cassidy's back. I remember thinking that this was the worst date ever. My heart quickened, then slowed down to nothing. I gasped for air. I either died or passed out. Whatever the case may be, I awoke and found myself in a comfortable room with a cozy fire and an elaborate bed. I am a slave. I'm allowed to go as I please. It's no use in escaping. I am what I am. Dead to the world, dead to myself, and alive only for her, the patron saint of murder.